The last couple of weeks I've been working insanely hard at making some new D&D content because I love playing Dungeons and Dragons as a overall, but I also have this thing where basically once I read something over and over and over again, my brain kind of just thinks that it's terrible even if it's not. So I've been working on a little bit of a multi-campaign scenario here where one of my campaigns is just for like the holidays. Essentially, it I call it the Jolly Force, where you essentially can send your players back in time, and through sending them back in time, you can have them stop events or help events progress through holidays, essentially. And it's just a really easy way to have almost kind of like one shots, I guess you could say, while still being fairly fun. I'll actually pull it up here, so if you guys do want to like read it or anything like that. But basically, there is a time watch thing, right? Like people that watch over time, and then they have these watches on their wrists that allow them to travel through time, but are also like small bags of holding. And then yeah, that's really all there is to it. But the only thing is for the time watches, you just make it where there's a little bit of a fear factor, I guess you could say to it, right? Where you make it where it can only travel once or twice or maybe three times through time, so they can't just spam it. It's not something where they travel through time and they're like, "Oh, we messed up a little bit, time to go back." It's like, no, you messed up, and it's just a little fun thing to kind of do on the side. I thought it would add a little bit of ambience, I guess you could say, to the campaign, a little bit of spice to the normality that D&D brings instead of just running some uh, regular fantasy or anything of that sort. Here's the characters. They actually did pretty good with the characters, I'm not gonna lie. So we got a tiefling wizard, which is just like a regular tiefling wizard. We got the Easter bunny. We got a leprechaun. We got a Luxodon that's like their leader, their tank. And then we have a gunslinger, which is basically like a Christmas elf, essentially. I don't know what our next guy is going to be because he hasn't been able to play yet, but it's a pretty fun and entertaining time for the campaign as overall. Like it's just wacky, and that's one of the things that if you are getting into D&D or if you've been playing D&D for a long time, I recommend running a few one shots every once in a while that are just pure wackiness. I basically sent them on this mission to help stop this holiday that was going to be like a fantasy holiday. So kind of going back to that fantasy setting, but they don't know how to interact with time travel and stuff like that. So they proceeded to go and dance in front of the king for literally no reason at all. But literally, they're just like, oh, well, we need to talk to the king, to try to help him out. But then they ended up doing like this performance act like they're a circus or something like that. And it worked out. I mean, they were rolling some crazy rolls, but still, it's just so fun and so wacky. And I really wish that a lot more DMs would take this into consideration when they are making D&D content, that it is okay to have your players just be fun and wacky and kind of just go away from the plot completely. uh, Now I think there's a little bit of a difference if you're building like a massive campaign, for example. So I have another campaign, I'm calling it Silver Dawn, and that campaign, when I described it to him, I said, hey, you guys can make wacky characters, but keep in mind there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in this campaign. So if you only build wacky characters, you're not really going to get through anything. And that's not saying you can't have a fun time, you can't do some wacky stuff, you can't get into some shenanigans, but I think that's an important part of being a player and being a DM is making your character just wacky enough to where it doesn't actually affect the plot. Or you're not going to sit for 20 sessions laughing at the same joke. Or you're not going to like wander off by yourself into a different universe. And that's just in general advice, like I would really give anybody is make it where in the campaign setting or in your character setting, you actually want to be there. Because if you make a character who's the edge lord who sits in the back, or you make your character who is someone who can't get along with people, or something like that, you are inevitably making a character that will never succeed. Now, is there an element where the DM can force you to succeed? Yeah, 100%. But that's not the DM's job, right? At the end of the day, the DM's job is to guide you, not to force you to do one thing or another, outside of like force you to kind of continue on with the basic plot and to force you to have consequences for your actions. That's the only thing the DM is really there for, is to tell that story. So yeah, like if you are getting into D&D or anything of that sort, that's just what I would say. Make someone who is fun, wacky, people can get along with, and personally, if you can't make a character like that, you're just gonna have a really hard time finding a group. Now, I'm not saying you can't play D&D at all like that. Just a lot of DMs these days don't want to DM for the guy who doesn't want to play the game. And I think that there's a big, big thing behind that, especially nowadays where all the content is 10 times more accessible. It's like if you just want to DM for a bunch of people who didn't want to play the game, you would just hop on like Reddit or something and like look for 10 random people to play or something like that over Discord. But yeah, I was just kind of excited to share my campaigns and like what I'm doing and maybe a little bit in general advice because we don't talk about D&D a lot on this channel, especially because some of my D&D stuff is a little bit wacky. I'll say, like even for a DM perspective, like it's a little out there because the homebrew just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. Like if you mess up homebrew one time, you have to make something crazy to balance out that homebrew. And that's how a lot of my earlier campaigns were, which we'll tell some more stories on that in the future. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and have a good day. Peace.